we know, the DNC is starting today, and Stephanie and I don't really feel like talking about that yet. So today we're going to focus on the border. And on Friday, there was a recent update released by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol stating that migrant counters at the border in July were the lowest they've been in 4 years. Border Patrol apprehended 56,408 migrants, which is reportedly a 32% decline in comparison to June numbers, and supposedly the lowest since September of 2020. CBS News reported that this marked the fifth consecutive monthly drop, and the decline in migrant crossings are being attributed, of course, to Biden's border crackdown policies, which is very hard for me to say with a straight face. But if you guys remember back in June, Biden announced an executive order, which actually was based on a previous authority invoked by Trump when he was in office, and it allows border officials to temporarily suspend some of the asylum processings and turn migrants away at the border. Since June, Border Patrol has reportedly removed more than 92,000 people to 130 countries, including at least 300 deportation flights. Now, this sounds great, right? And left-wing media outlets are praising the Biden-Harris admin and saying the border crisis has been resolved. But has it? Because let us just remind everyone of the more than 10 million illegal migrants that we know have crossed the border since Biden took office and made Kamala the border czar, as well as the at least 2 million gotaways that evaded Border Patrol. And if you still don't understand the critical nature of this number, I want to read something that I saw in Just the News, because they said that this number is, quote, greater than the individual populations of 45 out of 50 U.S. states. If illegal border crossers were a state, they'd be the sixth most populous state ahead of Illinois. That's up from illegal border crossers totaling more than the individual populations of 43 states in March, up from 23 states in June. In 2022, when Center Square first started making the comparisons to state, country, and county populations. So no other presidential administration in U.S. history has ever reported even a fraction of the 12.5 million in one term, let alone multiple terms combined. As the Center Square has reported every month since early 2021, after President Biden took office, the number of illegal border crossers increased. The publicly reported CBP apprehensions data excludes gotaways, the tens of thousands identified as inadmissible released into the country through the CBP One phone app every month, and the tens of thousands released through parole programs created by DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. The CBP apprehension data also excludes the hundreds of thousands that were brought in through parole programs from 8 specific countries, including after the administration opened processing centers in Colombia and Guatemala to facilitate entry into the U.S., end quote. So nationwide encounters show that 2,597,784 illegal foreign nationals have been apprehended just this fiscal year. 3.2 million were apprehended in fiscal year 2023. That was the highest number ever on record. This is in addition to the 2.7 million apprehended in 2022 and the 2 million apprehended in 2021. Again, this is just foreign nationals. And the majority of these are the single male adults that we've been talking about for the last 2 years. And did I mention the unprecedented numbers of illegals apprehended at the northern border as well? Because we've seen the highest numbers of illegal migrants crossing at the northern border under the Biden-Harris admin than any other administration in recorded history. There have been over 160,000 this fiscal year so far, 190,000 in fiscal year 2023, and nearly 110,000 in fiscal year 2022. Not to mention the minimum of 500,000 unaccompanied minors. And I was reading in the New York Post that Biden himself estimated that 75 to 80% of unaccompanied minors who have illegally entered the United States suffer from trauma from being brought into the country by smugglers and, quote, routinely engage in physical and sexual abuse, end quote. So, Stephanie, what do you think? Is the border crisis over?
No, this is completely intentional to make it look like they're addressing the border to get some votes in election season. Then it's right back to a wide open border. And that pisses me off that Biden said that because he's encouraging it. He knows these kids are being horrifically abused, but he still encourages it and lets it happen. And then I want to just touch on, you said a parole program from 8 different countries. And I'm assuming that's what Trump was talking about, where they are like literally letting people out of prison on parole to come here to America. This is insane. And, everyone knows that Kamala and Tim Walz are not the answer to the border crisis. Like, Trump is the only one that has the record of securing the border. So Kamala can pretend that she's tough on the border, like all of a sudden, but no one's going to buy it after they've allowed this to happen. Millions of people have come over the border in the past 3 years. It is insane. And I want to just point out the massive economic cost to an open border. So in 2023, the government spent $451 billion taking care of illegals. So the older millennial on TikTok, he pulled these numbers and he said that we had a $1.7 trillion deficit in 2023. So do some basic math, and 26.5% of our deficit was taking care of illegals. More than a quarter of our total deficit, which means it's borrowed money, which means we're paying interest on it. Like, that is what the Biden Harris administration has done to our country, and it's sickening.
Yeah, it's insane. So, what also happened on Friday, New York Congressman Nick Langworthy, he introduced the Safer Borders Act. He was giving an address in Buffalo, New York, and basically this legislation is intended to prohibit the DHS from paroling these migrants who are designated as known or suspected terrorists. The fact that we even have to have this kind of program is just alarming to me. But in his address, he talked about the recent apprehension of an illegal migrant Peruvian gang leader in New York, this guy named Gianfranco Torres Navarro. And I guess he was wanted in Peru for the alleged murders of 23 fucking people. So Langworthy said, quote, under Biden's administration, millions of illegal migrants have been paroled into this country, including Mr. Navarro, many from countries known to be breeding grounds for terrorism. We have seen these consequences. It's already happened in this country. Just recently, 8 individuals from
Tajikistan.
Tajikistan. Wow, I'm struggling today. Okay, from Tajikistan with suspected ties to ISIS were arrested in a multi-agency sting in Los Angeles, New York, and Philadelphia. All 8 of them crossed our southern border, and one even used the Customs and Border Patrol One app, a key tool in this administration's mass parole program to enter this country illegally. These are exactly the kinds of people that the Safer at the Border Act will prevent from being paroled into the United States in the first place, end quote.
You're right. It's ridiculous. We have to have an act to stop this. But I'm sorry, 23 murders, that makes you a serial killer. Like, how many people did Ted Bundy kill? I mean, this is insane. And these are the people we're just like, yep, come on in. Come on into America. We'll give you room and board and free food and anything else you want. But speaking of New York, a New York City councilman, Robert Holden, went on the Morning Wire podcast to talk about the madness in this city and how it must end. So I'm going to play a clip where he's talking about these crazy sanctuary city laws that are currently in place in New York City. Listen to this.
Years after 9/11 that prohibited NYPD or any city law enforcement agency from working with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, better known as ICE. It cuts off any communications between NYPD and ICE. And we didn't learn a lesson from 9/11 in New York City. We'll never learn. But the problem at 9/11 was we didn't have any communications between local, state, and city law enforcement. And that's how the 19 terrorists got through on 9/11. So we corrected that by forming Department of Homeland Security and Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Unfortunately, like I said, the New York City Council, over those 20 years, passed 4 laws that prohibit NYPD from even working with ICE. unless the person is convicted only of really felony charges or serious misdemeanors. But it doesn't go far enough, because what they do is, and what they did on the alleged rapist, the recent one, Daniel Bonilla from Nicaragua, he was convicted of sexual assault, but he plea bargained down from rape to sexual assault because the first victim didn't want to testify. Now, we know that that should have red flagged certainly NYPD to contact ICE, but NYPD says they were prohibited because he wasn't convicted of rape. So that's kind of crazy, isn't it? When you can get a plea bargain down to still sexual assault, and then we want to keep them in the United States. I don't get it. I think it makes everybody less safe, not only in New York City, but in the country. So sanctuary city laws go too far. They protect essentially only criminals, and they protect a small minority of criminals who are here illegally.
Just think about how insane that is, that 9/11 happened in New York City. So that is why we have ICE and DHS. But New York City says, no, 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 we're not allowed to talk to DHS or ICE about any of these people. Like, that is just insane to me. And so, anyhow, he has a bill to correct these insane sanctuary city laws, but the speaker already told him that she won't touch it. She will not touch the subject of sanctuary city laws. And he said a lot of the Democrats in leadership, they haven't changed their views despite all of the crime happening with illegal immigration. But he said his constituents they're changing their minds and letting the councilmen know about it. Like, they're seeing the devastating effects of the city with crime because it's happening in their neighborhood. It's happening on the way to work. It's happening on the subway, and they want someone to do something about it. But he's saying he's stuck because leadership absolutely won't touch it.
And he's a Democrat. I mean, this is
Yeah.
coming from a Democrat councilman.
Yep.
Like, New York is such a shit show. I was reading in the New York Post from last week, they were saying that since July 1st, New York City taxpayers have spent $308 million on migrants. Okay, this is since July 1st. That's like a fucking month and a half. And that's bringing the state's like total illegal migrant tab to almost 5.5 billion. And if we break it down by the numbers, which are according to Mayor Adams' office, 113 million went to housing and shelters, 137 million went to social services and supplies, 29 million was spent on IT and administrative costs, 23 million went to food, and 7 million was spent on healthcare. Stephanie, again, this is just in the past month and a half. Like, that's fucking insane. And the state comptroller, Tom DiNapoli, he issued a report on Thursday complaining about how the city continues to bear, the majority of the burden for helping asylum seekers. Like, how about not being a fucking sanctuary city?
Yeah. Well, Mayor Adams, too, he's constantly complaining other states need to step up. No, why don't you change your status and let this law go through where you actually do something about it? But no, they want to stay a sanctuary city. They want to keep getting the federal funding for that. But now they're complaining when they actually have to step up and be a sanctuary city. Like, total hypocrisy once again. No surprise.
Yeah, and let's look at like another example of a non-border state that's experiencing the effects of the Biden-Harris immigration policies. So Springfield, Ohio has apparently experienced such a significant influx of migrants that it's caused a huge increase in violent crime and a full-blown housing crisis. So last month, city manager Brian Heck sent an urgent letter to Senators Tim Scott and Sherrod Brown requesting federal aid. And the letter said, quote, Springfield has seen a surge in population through immigration that has significantly impacted our ability as a community to produce enough housing opportunities for all. Springfield's Haitian population has increased 15 to 20,000 over the last 4 years in a community of just under 60,000 previous residents, putting a significant strain on our resources and ability to provide ample housing for all of our residents. Stephanie, like, it's increased by like 2/3, which is insane.
It's insane. Yeah.
Yeah. And before JD Vance became Trump's VP running mate, he presented this letter to Congress in July, and he was talking about how, like, not only is this influx of illegal migrants creating a housing crisis, but it's also putting a strain on hospital services and school services and all of the other things that, are geared for the community, that
Yeah.
all these resources are now being used up by these 20,000 new people.
And when that many people come, I mean, they are taking over city blocks, portions of the city. I mean, it is out of control. And so, speaking of like crime and everything, I want to list just a few. This is a small number of crimes that have been committed like just over the past month that actually made the news. There's no telling what's been happening that didn't make the headlines. That you had brought up all these Haitians. Well, a Haitian illegal migrant was arrested for the rape and aggravated assault of a pregnant woman in Boston. And get this, a judge fucking released him. He raped a pregnant woman and physically assaulted her, and the judge let him go. But luckily, ICE is stepping up in Boston and they were waiting for him and immediately arrested him. Thank God. Then we had 3 Palestinian suspected terrorists at the southern border in July. Based on what we've been seeing with these massive protests all over the United States, I can guarantee we have a hell lot more than 3 on the terrorist list. 3 Venezuelan migrants broke into a home in Colorado. So I caught this video on TikTok. The guy was posed as an Amazon delivery driver, goes up to the door, tries the door. When he sees it was unlocked, he signals to his friends. And these 2 other guys come out of nowhere and they all go in the home and take it over. And the whole thing was caught on the Ring doorbell camera. Then you have an illegal migrant that raped a woman in Coney Island. And that's when her boyfriend, like she was with her boyfriend, when he tried to save her, he was stabbed and forced to watch the assault. And once again, the man that raped her was previously arrested for rape, but released because in New York, they're only interested in arresting political candidates, not actually arresting criminals. Then Denver has been all over the news and social media lately because they received 42,000 Venezuelan illegal migrants just in the month of July alone. And this Venezuelan prison gang took over an entire apartment complex. That's what happens when you have tens of thousands of people being released from prison in their home country. They come here and they take over things. So literally a prison gang from Venezuela prisons comes into the United States. And this is not just happening in Venezuela. Like you said, there's like 8 countries doing this. So the JF radio show actually spoke to the owner of the apartment building, and he said this is actually the second building that the Venezuelan gangs took over. And what they do is they wait for someone to move out, and then they quickly get in there, and due to squatter rights in Colorado, he can't make them leave. There's no way to evict them. And they told him that if he keeps trying, they're going to kill him and his entire family. And they patrol the perimeter of the building with weapons. And it's this known gang called Tren de Aragua. And according to a Fox News article, Republican Texas Representative Tony Gonzalez described this gang as, quote, MS-13 on steroids, saying that some members have been coming to the United States for several years now. So that owner of the apartment building in Colorado, he then, when he wasn't getting anywhere with local police, went to the FBI and DHS, and they've done nothing. And they've threatened the owner and maintenance workers that have tried to access the building. So they can't even go and like repair things because they're getting all these violations from the city now that they're not up to code, but yet they can't because they're like literally being threatened with guns. So this gang has intimidated and threatened the tenants. And so most of the tenants had to move out, even though they're tied to a lease and still expected to pay rent, or it's going to hurt their credit. So these gang members basically just took over the whole thing. And then get this, they turn around and charge people rent to live there. They don't own the building, but they are charging people to pay rent every month. Like, it's absolutely insane. And since it's a sanctuary city, The governor and mayor don't want to do anything, just like in New York. And so it finally got to the point where so many things were out of code and like downright dangerous that the city sent out a letter to occupants that they had 6 days to leave before they boarded the place up. So they finally boarded it up and they like fenced it off so no one can go there. And according to Fox News, quote, the Albuquerque Police Department in New Mexico recently shared a bulletin from the Colorado Information Analysis Center with personnel in July, warning law enforcement of reports that that gang, Tren de Aragua in Denver, has been given a green light to fire on or attack law enforcement. Like, it's absolutely insane. And instead of playing a clip of like the news, I want to play a clip of a woman who actually lives in the area so she can explain what's happening in these sanctuary cities. And she's warning everyone to pay attention.
Oh, I'm not one to talk politics. Never have been. I try to stay out of those conversations. I've always respected what everyone feels and thinks. I still do. But I don't think a lot of you understand what's happening in our country right now, mainly because most of you don't live in a sanctioned city. I live in Denver. So the people that are living in these sanctioned cities, we are slowly losing control of our city, our cities, and the government's not doing anything. Governor Polis in Colorado, he is not doing anything about the apartment complex that has been taken over by Venezuelan gang members that have come over illegally. They have robbed 10 gun shops in Denver in the past month. They are strapping up, and this is just the first step. They're seeing what they can get away with, and so far they've been in this apartment complex for almost a month. The police can't do anything about it. We haven't brought in reinforcements, and they're just living in this apartment complex they overtook, and no one's doing anything. What do you think they're going to do next? They're going to start overtaking more apartment complexes, more buildings, more facilities. What did our country think was going to happen when their time was up in the hotels we provided to them? I had a feeling they were going to start overtaking things, and that's what's starting to happen. It takes a lot to scare me. I've been to third world countries, never really been freaked out or nervous. Never thought that I would have to buy a gun to feel safe. And even when I get my gun in a couple days, I don't even know if I'll still feel safe, but at least I'll have a weapon. I've never been against guns, but I've also never thought that I'm going to need to buy a gun for safety. But here we are. Here we are. And if you don't live in a sanctioned city, I really, really encourage you to do some research and see what's happening to our country. I understand if you're a Democrat and you have your reasons, right? Abortion, you're pro-abortion and same-sex marriage. I'm fine with that. I understand we all have our own opinions and our beliefs, and that's important to a lot of you. But I hope you understand that although those are important topics when it comes to voting, if Trump or someone else is not in office other than Camila, whatever her name is, that stuff's not going to matter because we will not have a country like we have now. Or
I thought she had so many good points. That's why I wanted to play the whole video. It's like, absolutely, what do you think is going to happen when their time runs up in these hotels? And they, you
Yeah.
know, and they've robbed 10 gun stores. They're like little armies running around. And she's absolutely right. We're not going to have America left. You're not going to have the freedom to do anything that these leftists want to do because we're being overrun by people that a lot of them are against all of that stuff. We know the pro-Palestinian crowd is, and everyone coming from the Middle East, but a lot of these South American countries as well. So they're all rooting for it. But at the end of the day, those are the types of people that these criminals are going to attack. Like, it's absolutely insane. I thought she worded it so well, though.
Yeah, especially when she was talking about how, she doesn't like to talk politics. And it's like, partially, I feel like that's what's gotten us into this mess is the people that don't want to talk about politics and all the shit that's gone on to completely destroy our country. And it's like, this is where we are right now. And when you were just like talking about the details of what happened with this apartment building, like it still blows my mind that this shit is happening in the fucking United States. Like this
Yeah.
is some third world country shit, like
Well, and that's
100%.
the thing. People were driving by and posting videos on TikTok. Third world is exactly what they described it. They were like, this literally looks like something you see in a third world country where just absolute mess and chaos. Like it doesn't look like anything you would ever expect to see in a developed country. I mean, it's really scary.
Where would you see armed men outside of an apartment building in the United States where the police aren't fucking doing anything about it? Like
Right.
I can't even understand how that's happening.
And where else is it happening that they're not
Right.
reporting on? Because I have seen people talking about city blocks. Like there was one guy, he's like, go drive around the hood in the night and go see every single corner. There are gangs of Venezuelans and Guatemalans, and they are running the streets. Like it's just they're taking over. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I've worked in plenty of gang neighborhoods in South Central Los Angeles throughout my LAPD career, and there was nothing as blatant as the shit that's taking place.
Yeah, it's
So,
sad.
well, you know who's sick of it? Arizona. Arizona's sick of the shit, and they're trying to take action. So last week, Arizona Supreme Court approved a Republican-led effort for border control to basically appear on the ballot this November. So it's a measure that was originally introduced back in June. It's Prop 314. And what it would do is it would make it a crime for migrants to cross into Arizona from Mexico unless they go through an official port of entry. So if it's passed, the proposal will allow law enforcement to arrest and deport illegal migrants who violate the law, and it will also make selling fentanyl punishable by up to 10 years in prison. And then some government agencies might also be required to use federal databases to verify non-citizens' eligibility for benefits. So, of course, you're getting pushback from the Democrats, but if voters from Arizona pass this legislation, it cannot be vetoed by the Democrat Mayor Katie Hobbs. And from what I gather, like it's very similar to Senate Bill 4 that was introduced in Texas back in March. But the Texas bill actually takes it a step further and makes violations punishable by up to 6 months in prison. But the Texas legislation is currently on hold because it's being challenged in court. I want to mention this. Like, I know we said we weren't going to talk about the DNC, but because it relates to the topic of crime that we're discussing today, I do want to say, like, what's happening right now is just another clear example of the hypocrisy of the left and the elites, because you know how they don't want a wall at the border. Well, they had no problem building a wall around the DNC. So this is how they're going to protect the 35,000 attendees and the 15,000 media personnel. Meanwhile, Chicago is literally the murder capital of the world. It has a homicide rate that's 5 times higher than New York. And the New York Post reported on Sunday that someone is shot in Chicago every 2 hours and someone is killed every 17 hours. And so far this year, 353 people have been murdered in Chicago, most of whom were Black, but that's like a whole other topic. And my point here is the elites do not give a fuck about the rest of us, and they don't care about actually stopping crime. They just want to pretend it doesn't exist when it suits them best. And what's happening at the DNC with, this border wall being built is the same fucking thing that Gavin Newsom did back in November when he cleaned up the streets of San Francisco before Xi Jinping came to visit. And they literally had metal barriers put up around the city to make sure that it would appear temporarily safe.
Yeah, and that's going to really piss off Chicago residents that have been asking for more safety and haven't gotten it. And I know, I mean, I'm from that area. A lot of my family and friends still live there, and not one single person says that they're going to vote for Kamala. Like they're fed up, and I hope enough people are smart enough to realize what's happening. So I'm really interested to see like coverage of the protests there and just what happens, because I think they've pissed off a lot of people.
Yeah, and I have one more thing to mention because this was like breaking news that is shouldn't even be breaking news in my opinion because they're not doing anything about it. But I don't know if you saw this, Stephanie. I guess like the House finally unveiled findings from their like impeachment inquiry into Biden. And they've concluded that Biden's family and their business associates ranked in more than $27 million through their foreign business dealings, but they're not looking to impeach him yet. So, like, that's why I don't even think this is worth talking about. Like, you're going to announce this, findings from this report, but we're just not going to do anything about it.
Yeah, I know. It's so ridiculous. Like more theatrics and drama to keep everybody, distracted, I guess. I don't know. It's like nothing ever comes of it. So I don't know why I'm even surprised.
Yeah.
So we'll have to keep everyone posted. As much as I don't want to watch the DNC or anything having to do with Kamala, 'cause I'm freaking sick of her. We'll let you guys know what happens. I'm sure there'll be some interesting events to report on. So we'll be back here Wednesday with any updates happening.
Yeah. And by the way, apparently, if you guys like want a vasectomy, like now's the time. Go to the DNC.
Or an abortion. They're handing
Or
out
an
free
abortion.
abortions. Literally, they are handing out like
Yeah.
this. This is the Democrat Party of 2024. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tara. Okay, so we'll see everyone back here on Wednesday with more crazy bullshit because it's coming. Hope you have a great week. Thanks for tuning in.